All right, we'll go ahead and get her started.
Good. Good.
I want to thank everybody for showing up here tonight with the bad weather we're having in Georgia, with the hurricane and all the rain and what's coming with it. Welcome to our 7th edition of Power to the People debate. I am your host, Brian Slowinski, along with I'm also a candidate. What's nice about this forum is the candidates get to ask questions of the other candidates. No one's ducking anything here. And I think we're given time to answer a question, and we're trying to be respectful of one another, but we can also be disagreeable as well. And I think that's the best way to be when it comes to this. So let me introduce all of our participants that we have so far. We have Mr. Al Bartel. He's running as an independent. Say hi, Al.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
We have Richard Dean Winfield. He's running as a Democrat. Say hi, Richard.
Hi, how are you? Greetings, Al, for the first time.
And we have Mr. Alan Buckley. Say hi, as running as an independent. Say hi, Al. Got no volume from you, Al.
You call him Al, the answer is Alan Buckley.
Alan, okay, thank you. And then we have Mr. Derek Grayson, running as a Republican. Say hi, Derek.
Hello.
And again, I'm Brian Slowinski. I'm running as a Libertarian and the Constitutional Party endorsee in this race. All candidates are invited. They're invited to come in at any time. So let's get started. This week's topic is national security, diplomacy, and defense. Just a little subject. So what everybody will be given is 5 minutes to basically say where you stand on all these issues. And I will use cards here to try to keep us in line. Got a green one for 30 seconds. Yellow one for 15 seconds, and when you see the red one, can you please conclude your remarks? That way we all have a reasonable and equal time in answering questions. If you are spoken about during a comment, you're given a chance to rebut yourself. Keep that to a minute for a rebuttal, okay? So, I'd like to also, we just added another person. We added the Green Party candidate, John Fortune. Say hi, John.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so there's 6 of us currently. I believe Annette Davis Jackson was going to be with us, but she has another commitment. So I believe it'll be just the 6 of us this evening. All right, so why don't we get started? Let's go in reverse alphabetical order this time. Mr. Winfield, you're up. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Thanks to Joy.
5 minutes.
In life.
On national security, diplomacy, and defense. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I mean, for those who haven't been to these events before, I'm Richard Dean Winfield. I am the philosopher union member running for Senate. I've been teaching at University of Georgia since '82, teaching philosophy. I'm a member of the Communication Workers Organizing Local 1365, which is an attempt to organize all employees at the state university system. In 2018, I ran for the U.S. House of Representatives in District 2. I was the first candidate advocating a federal job guarantee to wipe out unemployment and poverty income. In most encounters of candidates in this Senate race, as in other races I've been in, there's usually very little attention to foreign policy. But I think it's clear in this year of intensifying crises that our national welfare, our national security is intimately and irrevocably connected to global security. We said that with regard to the pandemic, which is something that is not the last of its kind, and we're going to see a lot more of them with increasing frequency in the future. And it's pretty obvious that we cannot keep the pandemic at bay unless we engage with other nations throughout the world to keep it under control everywhere it lifts its head. The same thing applies to the climate crisis that is advancing on all of us. with increasing velocity. We have so much going on with regard to the crises in our health, our economic welfare, racial justice, that we may think we can ignore climate heating that's underway, but the forests are burning, as never before in California. Intensifying. Hurricanes are coming in a double punch, heading in our direction after passing through Louisiana. And then, of course, we find ourselves in a world where nuclear weapons are once again raising their head as a problem that we have to avoid looking at. In every respect, we have to recognize that our national security is not something that can be separated from global security. And if you think about how we handle our national defense, when we emerged out of World War II, as an institution that appeared to have been completely invulnerable, separated by oceans from any real adversaries. We had a monopoly of nuclear weapons. And now here we are, century, well, I should say century, 3/4 of a century later, having spent billions of dollars, 70,000 wars, and we found ourselves in a condition where we can be completely destroyed in less than an hour by adversaries. And I think we have to also recognize that our push to be in a situation of both nuclear weapons superiority, where we are second to none, and have conventional superiority second to none, not actually enhanced our security. Because when we have a great imbalance in both conventional and nuclear weapons, this is something that fosters our nation to go through in order to prevent regime change, in order to stay in national interest. We've seen that in the case of Iran, we've seen it with South Korea, and we're going to see it in more places. We have to recognize that we have to engage in international engagement. So we're ready to be prepared for a future pandemic and further pandemic coming, because our global crisis is shifting the habitat of animals, and we are invading their habitats, their wild habitats. 75% of the diseases are caused by pathogens and government engage very active global cooperation with other nations, using the United Nations, using the World Health Organization. We have to do the same thing in climate change. We have to have an international Green New Deal, and also as a real important issue of our national security, moving to reduce nuclear weapons. So we don't have to have anyone with a finger on a button that can obliterate humanity. These things are things we need to be part of our national conversation.
All right, thank you, Alan. Excuse me, not Alan. Sorry, Richard. Pardon me. All right. Hear me okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. All right, next up will be myself, Mr. Slowinski. Again, my name is Brian Slowinski. Brian Slowinski. Brian Slowinski. I'm a Libertarian Party candidate in this race. I've also been recommended by the Constitution Party as well. When it comes to national diplomacy, there's a lot of things we can do. We spend too much money when it comes to that, and we don't spend it properly.
And I sat in small villages in Mexico and had the elders tell me that life was good before NAFTA. And as someone who grew up in Detroit, there are many auto workers who would say life was way better before NAFTA. So we need to quit using trade treaties as a cudgel to allow further theft from those countries to enrich the elites here in the United States, because these treaties are not helping the average person. And when refugees from Honduras are coming up to our border currently, we need to blame Hillary Clinton for allowing a coup, encouraging a coup in Honduras when she was Secretary of State under Obama. And the blame goes squarely on Obama's shoulders as well. We need to stop all these foreign interventions. If some country like Honduras elects a person who might want to implement socialized medicine, like they have in Canada, one of our trusted allies, it's not a reason for the United States to arrange for the overthrow of their government. Once again, the Georgia Green Party is the party of peace, and we need to transform the misuse of our military resources and build out Green New Deal infrastructure here, keeping those soldiers on, retraining them, having them install solar panels where appropriate, like here in Georgia and Texas, and other types of renewable infrastructure where it's appropriate. And once again, my name is John Green Fortune, and I'm the nominee of the Georgia Green Party. Thank you.
All right, you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I lost my internet connection again. Sorry about that. So John has went. Who else went? Mr. Grayson, did you go? Okay, so who's up next?
I've gone, of course.
Yes, sir. Mr. Buckley, can you go next? Can you guys hear him? I can't hear him.
No.
We don't hear you, Mr. Buckley. Don't hear you, Mr. Buckley. I want to apologize to the group for the obviously my internet storm came through here and ran havoc on all the internet here in the area. So please bear with me if I go out again. I spent the last 15 minutes trying to reboot and get it working again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know what's wrong with this computer. I've tried to monkey with it. Hopefully I'll figure it out by next time.
We got feedback too, again, like last time.
We have a lot more military than we need to defend ourselves. That's pretty obvious, I think, to most people.
Try turning your speaker down,
I don't know
Alan.
what that sound is, but we have tremendous nuclear resources in terms of weapons.
You're feeding into another open connection. Okay.
Let me try muting this. Is that better? I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we still have the chirping. Can you mute your computer?
Mute my computer?
Your speakers.
Your speaker.
I think I have, but
You're feedbacking into your microphone.
what?
Your speakers are feedbacking into your microphone.
on your phone.
All right, well, let me move further back, maybe that'll help.
If everyone will mute, it might help, besides Mr. Buckley.
What?
Go ahead, Mr. Buckley.
Anyways, we have tremendous nuclear weapons. We have great special forces, and no one's really a threat to us. I was at a Libertarian Party convention, I think it was 2007, and one of the speakers was a former nuclear submarine commander who was retired. And he was in on some high-level meetings with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. And he said, since World War II, our national security has never been at risk. And he called all these foreign wars foreign adventures. Let me try turning this speaker down. Hold on 1 second.
Gentlemen, as technical advice, you cannot be on your computer and on your phone.
All of our security services say is the biggest security threat we're facing. It's already putting large populations throughout the world in situations where they can no longer sustain themselves in their habitats. Because water supplies are drying up, lands are being inundated by floods much more frequently, and weather is becoming more and more extreme. We also have to ensure that all our trade treaties are such that they promote moving towards a green economy and ensure that people around the world are able to sustain their own economic livelihood, and that we can do the same ourselves. And I think with regard to our diplomatic corps, we have to recognize that we as a country are unrivaled in having a population with more experts on everywhere in the world than anywhere else, with more people who have lived in all of these countries or come from all of these countries than anywhere else. So we should take advantage of all that human expertise, experience, and talent, and not have political cronies be our ambassadors. We need to have people who are well-versed in the nations and the problems of the nations where they're going. And I'm old enough, as I think some of you are, to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Admittedly, we haven't had a nuclear exchange since 1945, but we've come all too close. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, with the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian archives have opened, and there's a case of a Russian commander of a missile battery who disobeyed successive orders telling him to launch an attack on the United States after all the Russian radar systems were getting false reports of incoming United States missiles. We've lost control over our nuclear weapons at various times. I think we can't have faith in the strategy of MAD, mutual assured destruction. We have to reduce arms, engage in negotiations, because China, for example, currently has little more than 300 nuclear weapons, the same amount that Britain has, that France has, that Pakistan has, that India is moving towards. Currently, we're spending more money than the next 6 nations combined. But China is at a point where it's not willing to suffer with this great imbalance. And we're at the verge where there could be a new arms race. There are new technologies of hypersonic vehicles. Trump has established a space force. China has destroyed satellites, testing military capabilities in space. We have to keep space completely demilitarized and work in an international way to really reduce weapons and recognize that if we have too much of an imbalance in either conventional or nuclear weapons, we are driving other nations to develop weapons of mass destruction of their own so that they can feel secure against the imbalanced forces facing them. Thanks.
All right, everybody hear me okay now? I'm finally back on again. I lost my signal again. I apologize to the group. Do you mind if I take a few minutes, since my first time I only got a couple minutes and I got knocked off, to finish my statement?
Sure, since you got the best time of the evening, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, don't tread on me. Just don't tread on us, I would say. All right. Again, just to finish up where I was before, I was talking about national security and diplomacy and defense. I was just talking about clamping down on visa overstays. I think we need also to have better communication between our intelligence agencies. That's one of the reasons why 9/11 happened. Is we didn't have enough communication between our agencies. They weren't sharing information properly. I believe we need to work on eliminating all foreign aid. I think that would save our country a lot of money, and we don't need to be supporting dictators around the world. I think better would be to open trade dialogues with everybody. If somebody's trading with you, they're less likely to shoot at you. Much better to trade butter than trade guns. And I would work on dramatically cutting our defense budget, concentrating on our nuclear superiority, mobility, stealth, artificial intelligence, and cyber. I think we need to be lean and mean, but we don't need to be the policeman for the world. I think we need to pull back on that. I also believe we need to harden our power and computer and our electric grids. I think that's truly important. If we ever get an EMP like that, I think we're going to be dead in the water because we really haven't hardened our grids the way we should. And we also need to learn to be a supplier to all our defense needs. Greatest example of it right now was our PPE and the shortage we had because everything was being made in China. We had President Trump had to implement the Defense Production Act in order to get stuff made here. That's just wrong. We need to be our supplier of all things minimum related to defense and keeping our country going. And I think that would be a huge way to give us stronger national security and defense. I mean, that's one of the number one things our national government is supposed to do, is supposed to defend us and keep us secure, keep the homeland secure. And I think we need to work on that. So I'll drop it off to I forget wherever you guys were. Were you just doing questions? Where were you?
Well, we all finished our 5-minute communication,
Okay.
and Richard was the first one to do a 1-minute question and answer kind of response.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Anybody? Mr. Buckley, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to say, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Al Bartel, I don't know where you're coming from with isolationists. The U.S. dominates the entire world militarily, and we have 800 foreign military bases. So I think a number of us are just talking about cutting back some on the world domination, while still, personally, I always want our nation to have the strongest military by far. But we need to adapt. There's an article on my website that I pulled from The Economist magazine where they talk about how aircraft carriers are basically extinct or becoming extinct because of modern technology. They're just an awfully easy target, and they cost a huge amount to make. So I think that's an example where we're going to have to get the political will to stop making aircraft carriers and realize that we're going to have land-based aircraft operations, because we're just creating extremely large, extremely expensive, easy to knock off targets. That article I pointed out, they were talking about helicopters that don't work well, and they're a danger to the Marines, but we're going to spend $31 billion on it because nobody really cares enough to put their hand up and say, no, we have to be prudent in the things we do in terms of military spending. And we don't need 800 military bases, over 110 in Italy the last time I checked. But we are going to have a lot of foreign bases, more than any other country, I think. But like as Brian Slawinski pointed out, if we got rid of 2/3, we'd still have, roughly four times the rest of the world combined. Is everybody hearing that rain noise?
Yes, sir.
Is that just me? Anyway, my point is, no one's arguing for isolation. We're just arguing for a more sane world where we don't dominate and are constantly, least I'm arguing we shouldn't constantly be the first thing that anybody. Let's put it this way: if a foreign country put bases in the U.S., everyone would be encouraged to attack.
Having a population with more experts on everywhere in the world than anywhere else, with more people who have lived in all of these countries or come from all of these countries than anywhere else. So we should take advantage of all that human expertise, experience, and talent, and not have political cronies be our ambassadors. We need to have people who are well versed in the nations and the problems of the nations where they're going. And I'm old enough, as I think some of you are, to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Admittedly, we haven't had a nuclear exchange since 1945, but we've come all too close. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, with the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian archives have opened, and there's a case of a Russian commander of a missile battery who disobeyed successive orders telling him to launch an attack on the United States after all the Russian radar systems were getting false reports of incoming United States missiles. We've lost control over our nuclear weapons at various times. I think we can't have faith in the strategy of MAD, mutual assured destruction. We have to reduce arms, engage in negotiations. Because China, for example, currently has little more than 300 nuclear weapons, the same amount that Britain has, that France has, that Pakistan has, that India is moving ahead towards. Currently, we're spending more money than the next 6 nations combined. But China is at a point where it's not willing to suffer with this great imbalance. And we're at the verge where there could be a new arms race. There are new technologies of hypersonic vehicles. Trump has established a space force. China has destroyed satellites, testing military capabilities in space. We have to keep space completely demilitarized and work in an international way to really reduce weapons and recognize that if we have too much of an imbalance in either conventional or nuclear weapons, we are driving other nations to develop weapons of mass destruction of their own so that they can feel secure against the imbalanced forces facing them. Thanks.
All right, everybody hear me okay now? I'm finally back on again. I lost my signal again. I apologize to the group. Do you mind if I take a few minutes? That's my first time. I only got a couple minutes and I got knocked off to finish my statement.
Sure, since you got the best time of the evening, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, don't tread on me. Just don't tread on us, I would say. All right. Again, just to finish up where I was before, I was talking about national security and diplomacy and defense. I was just talking about clamping down on visa overstays. I think we need also to have better communication between our intelligence agencies. That's one of the reasons why 9/11 happened, is we didn't have enough communication between our agencies. They weren't sharing information properly. I believe we need to work on eliminating all foreign aid. I think that would save our country a lot of money, and we don't need to be supporting dictators around the world. I think better would be to open trade dialogues with everybody. If somebody's trading with you, they're less likely to shoot at you. Much better to trade butter than trade guns. And I would work on dramatically cutting our defense budget, concentrating on our nuclear superiority, mobility, stealth, artificial intelligence, and cyber. I think we need to be lean and mean, but we don't need to be the policeman for the world. I think we need to pull back on that. I also believe we need to harden our power and computer and our electric grids. I think that's truly important. If we ever get an EMP like that, I think we're going to be dead in the water because we really haven't hardened our grids the way we should. And we also need to learn to be a supplier to all our defense needs. Greatest example of it right now was our PPE and the shortage we had because everything was being made in China. We had President Trump had to implement the Defense Production Act in order to get stuff made here. That's just wrong. We need to be our supplier of all things minimum related to defense and keeping our country going. And I think that would be a huge way to give us stronger national security and defense. I mean, that's one of the number one things our national government is supposed to do, is supposed to defend us and keep us secure, keep the homeland secure. And I think we need to work on that. So I'll drop it off to where, I forget, wherever you guys were you just doing questions? Where were you?
Well, we all finished our 5-minute communication,
Okay.
and Richard was the first one to do a 1-minute question and answer kind of response.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Anybody? Mr. Buckley, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to say, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Al Bartel, I don't know where you're coming from with isolationist. The U.S. dominates the entire world militarily, and we have 800 foreign military bases. So I think a number of us are just talking about cutting back some on the world domination, while still, personally, I always want our nation to have the strongest military by far. But we need to adapt. There's an article on my website that I pulled from The Economist magazine where they talk about how aircraft carriers are basically extinct or becoming extinct because of modern technology. They've just been awfully easy target, and they cost a huge amount to make. So I think that's an example where we're going to have to get the political will to stop making aircraft carriers and realize that we're going to have land-based aircraft operations, because we're just creating extremely large, extremely expensive, easy to knock off targets. That article I pointed out, they were talking about helicopters that don't work well, and they're a danger to the Marines, but we're going to spend $31 billion on it because nobody really cares enough to put their hand up and say, no, we have to be prudent in the things we do in terms of military spending. And we don't need 800 military bases, over 110 in Italy the last time I checked. But we are going to have a lot of foreign bases, more than any other country, I think. But like as Brian Selinsky pointed, we got rid of 2/3. We still have, roughly 4 times the rest of the world combined. Is everybody hearing that rain noise?
Yes, sir.
That's just me. Anyway, no one's arguing for isolation. We're just arguing for a more sane world where we don't dominate and are constantly, at least I'm arguing we should constantly be the first thing that anybody thinks of when they're angry at a foreign power. Let's put it this way: if a foreign country put bases in the U.S., everyone would be encouraged to attack them. I mean, we can't even fathom something like that. When the Soviet Union tried to put bases in Cuba, we went ballistic, and there was an obvious immediate threat that we put our foot down with respect to. We just need to try to make a little bit better efforts at understanding where some other people are coming from, and we need to be smart about fighting terrorism. And we are energy independent. Israel's doing fine. Its only real enemy there is Iran. Iran is enemies with pretty much everybody except Syria.
Well, I'll take a minute, Alan, to communicate regarding the communication you just delivered about many of you are arguing for isolationists because of the dominance that we have in regard to bases and resources around the world. And that's accurate. We do have a dominance in that. But that's not where the isolationist theory is growing. The isolationist theory is growing in. We tend to think that our assessment about world activity, the intelligence we gather around the world, intelligence we gather regarding conflicts around the world originates here in the United States. That's an isolationist theory in a strategic assessment model. It's nothing to do with the domination of what we have in terms of warhead, equipment, and manpower.
Anything
I
else?
really don't understand your points, but my point is just, if anything, we need to retract some and, be a little bit less dominant while always having the strongest military by far. So, no one's talking about isolation. That's so far from reality, but I don't think that's something that's conceivable.
Point made, buddy. I hear you.
All right, Mr. Grayson or Mr. Fortune, would you like to speak up? Anything to say?
No, I think I said all I needed to say. I have no response to anything that was said earlier.
Okay. John, anything from you, sir?
Yes, I see the current administration having diverged really far afield from prior positions that were extremely flawed regarding isolation and treaties. The desire of Donald Trump to cancel the START treaty that was initiated, I believe, under Reagan. This is madness. We do not need to encourage more production of nuclear arms. They are a terrible threat to the world. And so when we have domestic disturbances here in this country, one has to wonder if, as I've said before, if things go out of control, who is going to get a hold of this incredible excess of nuclear weapons in this country? This is a threat to the world, and the policies of our current administration, by being a threat to the world, they threaten our own existence. And previously, the so-called strategy of mutually assured destruction was brought up. This needs to end. We need to adopt a no strike first policy. And we need to be able to reinstate manufacturing here of all critical products so that we're never in this ridiculous situation we are in with not enough personal protective gear. There's a lot of advances in technology that would allow small-scale manufacturing to take off here. But what ended up really destroying manufacturing in this country was the hatred by the elites in this country of labor unions and the modest power they had amassed in the 1970s. And I knew working class people in the 1970s who had a decent standard of living in Detroit, and they had to thank labor unions for that decent standard of living. The destruction of labor unions by Reagan and the failure of any Democratic president to substantively increase the power of labor has meant that we've reduced the living standards in this country by exporting good manufacturing jobs abroad, and made ourselves insecure, as demonstrated by the lack of PPE during this crisis. Thank you.
All right, would anybody else like to make a comment? Otherwise, we'll go on to our closing statements.
Can I make a comment on something, John?
Sure,
Just
go right ahead. Go right ahead, sir.
It has to do with the role of the disempowerment of labor in the, I guess you could say, the deindustrialization of the United States, and in a way the lowering of both wages and employment. And that is in some other countries in Europe, you have what's called employee empowerment. Or I should say employee co-determination. And what that means is that on corporate boards, half the seats are taken by employees elected by their peers. And if we had employee co-determination in this country, the corporate boards had half their seats taken by representatives of investors and half by employees, you wouldn't see firms being able to dismember their operations to sort of pad the investment portfolios of investors. They wouldn't be sending off jobs overseas with impunity through an internal empowerment of the people who were largely responsible for creating the wealth of those enterprises. There would be a way of ensuring that they operate in a way that is more in line with the welfare of the United States as a whole. And I think that's something we want to think about.
All right, thank you, Richard. Anybody else like to comment about anything?
I appreciate your comment there, Richard, and in agreement with you that we need structures like that to put labor representatives on corporate boards and end all this outsourcing. Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to go to our closing statements. Everybody will be given 2 minutes. Please try to stay within time. We're going to do this in reverse, 2 minutes in reverse order this time. We're going to go from the top of the alphabet all the way down. So, Mr. Bartel, you're first, sir. Go right ahead.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the diplomacy, foreign policy, and defense. It is clear that I am concerned about our isolationist policy. It undermines the intelligence community to develop global intelligence partnerships around the world. The isolationist policy undermines strategic assessment models that are built on relationships with other nations. The isolationist policy undermines our tactical deployment strategies that are useful in situations where we build partnerships in different parts of the world. And last but not least, it undermines the struggles for freedom. Nothing is more detrimental to the struggles of freedom around the world than the isolationist policies that are practiced currently in the United States foreign policy. So we must have a broad-based diplomacy, a broad-based strategy based on stakeholders, where we exchange information and data platform, where we exchange intelligence about culture. And when we do that, the American intelligence community will benefit by far. The U.S. Senate, in its advisory consent role, will be able to sustain democratic values. And the Congress, the presidency, and our judicial system will be better off with a broad-based diplomacy with strategic partners as we move forward in the dawn of the 21st century.
Thank you, Mr. Bartel. Mr. Buckley, you're up, sir. Are you ready? Mr. Buckley? 2 minutes, sir. We'll come back to you, Mr. Buckley. Okay, John Fortune, you're next, sir. He's having technical difficulties.
Okay.
Go ahead, 2 minutes, sir.
So we've talked about defense and diplomacy. I've long been a fan of diplomacy. And sometimes you end up developing personal relationships with people who have been in the diplomatic corps. And you learn from those people that the news stories that we're getting seem to reflect other values that have nothing to do with what's really transpiring abroad. One case in point was the Paris Climate Accords, in which Obama was hailed as a champion for closing the deal on a climate accord. However, what wasn't reported was that actually behind the scenes during the entire presidency of Obama, he was essentially maintaining the same obstruction perspective to meaningful carbon reduction targets. And so we need to not only have a strong diplomatic core that reflects not only our desires of our oil companies, but that of ordinary Americans. Because our values of ordinary families who want to be able to stop climate change and retain a semblance of the environment we have here was subverted by the weak and meaningless Paris Climate Accord. And once again, my name's John Fortune, and thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Mr. Grayson, 2 minutes, sir.
Well, I'm Derek Grayson. My platform is very, very simple. 100% of the Constitution, 100% of the time. If you look at many of the people that are running today, very few of them even mention the word. It's almost as if it is non-existent. I listen to the ads. I hear them cutting each other up, left and right, making personal attacks and whatnot, but none of them seem to find room for the Constitution. And if we follow the Constitution to the letter which it is written, with maybe the exception of the 16th Amendment because it should be repealed, I think we would see a difference in the country. It's just like when preachers actually teach the word of God to their parishioners, people tend to understand God a lot better, but they don't. If you look at the number of deaths under Obama during the war, of course, they had 2 terms, but they will far exceed the number of deaths under President Trump. And the same thing with Obama. They will far exceed the number of deaths by President Trump. So President Trump is doing something that's right. He's bringing the troops home. There is no more regime change policies taking place. And I think that that's a good thing in this Constitution. Thank you for having me on the show, Brian. Thank you to my opponents for being here and sharing your thoughts as well.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. I believe I'm next, and then Mr. Winfield will be up, and we'll see if we can get Mr. Buckley at the end. Again, my name is Brian Slowinski. Brian Slowinski. Brian Slowinski. I've sponsored these debates because I believe that the people need to hear more than the 30-second soundbite, more than the focus group answer. Stop attacking one another and actually start learning from one another. I think if we start learning, everyone's an expert in something. Everybody has a tidbit that might make that difference. I agree with Mr. Grayson. We do need to get back to the Constitution of the United States of America and also get rid of the income tax. If we do that, we can help to bring this country around again. The problem right now is we got too much spending, too much taxing, and too much government. My campaign as a Libertarian endorsed candidate and the Constitution Party recommended candidate in this race is about bringing people together. That's the reason why I sponsored these debates. And I want to thank all you who have been participating from the bottom of my heart for doing this, because I think we're a better as the state of Georgia for doing it this way, and we're better as a country for communicating. Thank you. And next up, Mr. Winfield. 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, and thanks everyone for participating in this event. We as would-be senators and as citizens in general are really here to do what we can to make our government be a guardian of our freedoms. And our freedoms should extend beyond the relatively impoverished list of rights in our Constitution to include the social rights we've neglected, the rights to health care, the right to housing, the right to a decent livelihood, the right to education at all levels, and the right to legal representation in both civil as well as criminal cases. But we can see in the events that are striking us and every country in the world that the realization of these freedoms really cannot be completely separated from global security. And that global security really revolves around ensuring that not only we, but that other people in the world have their right to health care fulfilled, that we mobilize resources with other countries of the world to ensure that we keep pandemics under control, and that we ensure that wherever new pathogens break out, resources are made available so that people get what they need. The same thing applies to the advancing crisis of climate. We have a right to a safe and livable environment that we can hand down to our grandchildren and generations to come. But we can't do that without ensuring that there is not just a United States Green New Deal, but an international New Deal. And that means that we have to do our fair share as the richest nation in human history to mobilize resources with other of the wealthiest nations to ensure that the nations of the world can make a transition to green energy and be able to have growing energy resources so that they can bring their people out of poverty. But at the same time, we have to ensure that no one goes without a livelihood as we make this transition, both in the United States and elsewhere. And then we have to face the growing threat of nuclear proliferation and a renewed arms race on land, on sea, in the air, and in outer space. And we have to make sure that we engage in international cooperative measures to halt that arms race, to move to reduce armaments, both conventional and nuclear, and recognize that our security is not enhanced when we allow things to be in a complete state of imbalance. We have to instead create a world where everyone feels secure, and we respect nations to the extent that we allow them to feel unthreatened, while at the same time promoting the freedom of everyone throughout the world as best we can. So thank you. For more information on my platform, my campaign, go to winfieldforsenate.com. Listen to my podcast, America Unchained. I have a book of political policy called Democracy Unchained, where I detail both the policies I'm advocating and how they can be properly funded. So thank you, and thanks to my fellow candidates for engaging in meaningful discussion once again.
All right, thank you, Richard. Mr. Buckley, are you available now, sir?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. 2 minutes.
My campaign slogan is Save Tomorrow. Wish for tomorrow to be as good as or better than today. It's going to require reasonable sacrifice. Our government doesn't work on a long-term basis. Debts are going to spiral out of control, as the GAO said in 2007. Unless we get a hold of the finances, it's not happening under the major parties. We need to get healthcare costs to diminish and use market force. If we do that, it's not going to happen under the major parties. They've both sold out to the drug industry, the health insurers. I'm running as an independent candidate. I have the ability to stay free of special interest groups as I am now. I believe in protecting the environment in practical ways that are listed on my website. Yes, I want the U.S. to always have the strongest military in the world by far, but we have to have strong finances to be able to have a strong military. As Admiral Mike Mullen, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said in 2011, our debt is our greatest national security threat. He said that when told that was $15 trillion. Now it's 27. It's on the verge of growing out of control. So I offer solutions to all these problems. They involve reasonable sacrifice. They're on my website, buckleyforsenate.org, BUCKLEY4senate.org, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
All right. Go back to this here. Thank you. I want to thank all the candidates for participating. I believe the next one we have is in 2 weeks. We're taking 2 weeks off here, one for Labor Day, and I believe next week we didn't have anything planned. Unless you guys want to get together, we can. It's up to you. But I want to make sure we have good participation if we do it next week. What say you? Would you participate next week on a different subject if you
I'm available.
Available?
Did you miss Mr. Martell in his closing statement?
Mr. Bartell, did you not give a closing statement?
I did. Derek was paying attention so intensely, and he absorbed everything I said, so.
I thought he did because he was first.
Yeah, I want to make sure,
I think it's because he's got rose-colored glasses on. So anyway, if you're available next week, we can still do something, but I want to make sure we at least have good participation, at least a 6. Are you all available next Monday?
I'm available.
John?
I'll have to review my calendar.
Okay, how about you, Alan? Okay, well then we'll do something for next week. Send me your ideas on what you'd like to speak about, because we already have other things. It could be something else that we can talk about that we have not listed before. I'll try to send you guys something out, and we should come to a consensus on it, and we can talk about it. So next week, 7 o'clock. Again, thank you to all the candidates. We are the candidates because we're candidate driven, and we'll give actual candidate answers, not the 30-second soundbite or the focus group answer. We're here to defend our arguments and to defend our country. Again, I want to say thank you to all the participants. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.